An angle is a concept that a customer will resonate with in order to achieve a sale.
You're not just saying, here's my product, this is what it is. You're finding another way to speak about your product that addresses the benefits or the pain points.
Your angle should give a convincing reason for your potential customer to take action. Your angle should be your unique features or benefits of your product. Why should consumers buy your product or service?
Do you know what your audience responds to? Do you know why the market wants to respond to your product? Have you had the chance to see it in action, already get, whether it's having campaigns live, seeing a lot of testimonials on your website?
When you bring in your angle and other content to support your angle, once you establish a winner, it starts raining.
Welcome to All Killer, No Filler. It is Thursday. My name is Eric, and this is the D2C podcast. And for this edition of All Killer, No Filler, we're releasing Module 3 of Scale School, the course that we created in partnership with Pilothouse Digital in late 2021 that sort of is all about how they launch and scale ads on Meta Ads. What's cool about the course is it's entirely evergreen. The things that are taught in there are still the things that Pilothouse uses to launch and scale brands. And so we decided, why don't we put out the most valuable lesson taught in that course, which is what we essentially call the Pilothouse method or the pilot method for how to find winning creative for Meta Ads. It also works for TikTok ads. I hope you enjoy it. On with the show. Thousands of people have jump-started their TikTok content strategy using Kohli's TikTok Creative Brief template. That's because it has all the steps for successful creator collaborations and best practices to create fun and engaging TikToks. If you haven't grabbed your copy yet, don't worry. Kohli just dropped a brand new version of their popular template filled with even more tips and insights to level up your TikTok game. Head to kohli.com/TikTok to download your free copy and start creating TikToks for your brand that people actually want to watch. In Module 1 here, we talk a lot about creating your angles. And I wanted to just back up a little bit and just start, what do we talk about when we say marketing angles?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. It's a topic I love wholeheartedly. And as a marketer, it's really important to understand this. Most people do, but an angle is a concept that is different than another concept that a customer will resonate with in order to achieve a sale or a lower cost per
So
acquisition.
screaming at the camera and saying, buy my product, is not really an angle, right?
That could be an angle. It may not perform as well as other angles. So that one might be called abrasive,
Okay.
right? Which is different than hey, here's a bunch of benefits you might want, as an example, specifically.
How do you come up with angles?
You come up with angles by putting yourself in the consumer's seat and you say, what target demographic could possibly want to buy this thing? So let's give an example, this mug.
Yep.
Okay, so an angle for this, target demographic obviously is anyone who drinks anything out of a vessel, which is the world.
The world,
so
everyone with a mouth.
That's a good demo. So what we're now gonna do is focus on an angle. So when you look at this thing, you have a handle. It's ergonomic. Instantly, well balanced. So that's an angle. It's an ergonomic mug. Another one is that it's big. It's full. It can hold a lot of liquid. So that would be another angle. Colors. So there's a creative person in the audience, perhaps. I like the style of that. That would be a third angle.
And it reminds me of my grandma.
My goodness. Oh, family feelings.
Family feelings.
Memories. That would be another angle. So, the time I had with my grandmother drinking tea in the UK, as a memory, and then you would drag that through and you would have other people resonate to that memory with their grandmas having delicious tea.
The quote that I always think of is an Anton Chekhov quote, and he said, "Don't tell me the moon is shining, show me the reflection from a glint of broken glass." And so it's literally, you're not just saying, here's my product, this is what it is. You're finding another way to speak about your product that addresses the benefits or the pain points in a lived experience.
Lived or
imagined.
Wanted to have lived.
That's right. Aspirational experience.
Aspirational. So back in the day, you're not selling the car, you're selling the leather seats inside of the car, you're selling the experience. Nissan Pathfinder. They're not selling the Nissan Pathfinder, they're selling the idea of you living in the woods.
Yeah, you can be free with a Nissan Pathfinder.
You can definitely be free as soon as you take your family, give them to your parents, take your car and go away for the weekend.
Yeah. I love it. And my favorite angle story is one that Dave told on a podcast. And if you haven't heard this podcast, it's specifically it was about selling a lunchbox. And there's a lot of ways you can sell a lunchbox. It's convenient, it's cool, it has this functionality. But the angle that worked specifically best about this was getting right into the thought process of someone who'd buy this. And specifically it was, this will enable your child to take lunches that make the other kids jealous. So it's specifically about this lunchbox will allow your kid to take a sizzling steak, and then there's so many levels on that. It's like, I want my child to feel special, and then you get into the head of the child. It's like, I want to feel like I've got the best lunch at all of school.
And the real truth is that there's a gap there because the kid doesn't have a credit card.
No.
And he doesn't even know he wants to brag about the fact that he's got a hot steak in his lunch kit.
He probably doesn't like steak. Kids don't like steak.
He's like, why'd I get this steak? But the parent comparing themselves to the other parents who would have a steak that is hot for their child would be something that would drive a behavioral purchase decision. And that's why it's so important to test many different angles. And on reflection, that was about 2 years ago. And I remember Dave running around the office being like, yo, it hit.
We got the sizzle up in this steak.
We've been trying to come up with angles for weeks. Like, boom, boom, boom. Probably went through dozens of angles. Dozens.
And so practically, like when you have a new account come on, you have a brand that you're working on, how do you actually generate angles? You just try to take a subject, take a consumer, and then try to really get into their head about how they approach this product, what problems it solves for them.
Yeah, I mean, you make a spreadsheet and start with 5 angles. The angles, how you would come about that, you would put yourself in the customer's shoes and you would think, what would I want? If you're unable to do that, ask other people, cheat your way through it, fake it till you make it. That's a good tactic too. But what you want to do is contrasting. So every target demo that you're trying to go after should have a contrasting group of, say, 5 angles. You do you, but that's what I would start with. And then come up with them and write them down. And then inside of that, you're going to have your 5 angles, and you'll have to keep watching to learn more.
They've already bought the course.
Yeah.
But it's all here in Scale School. Because angles are everything. You can run a campaign that has out of the box promotional language about how you think of your product, and it can just fall totally flat.
Let's talk about specifics for a second.
Yeah.
You were right. So you run ads. So if we're going to get tactical here, which we love to do, you're going to run ads to a Shopify store as an example. Ad. Hello, this is a product. Store. Product. The product might have looked good. Features might be described well. But at the end of the day, I think, which is where you're going, if there's nothing that's going to resonate with the customer, why
that psychological hook?
Even if it's subtle, and even if it's simple, it's not a big pre-sale page. It's not a long video that is an explainer. There needs to be some connection there. When you bring in your angle and other content to support your angle, once you establish a winner, it starts raining.
Yeah. I think about getting subscriptions for D2C newsletter. And when we started using the tagline sound smarter in meetings with your boss, and that automatically that creative angle, it just automatically targets the exact right people in marketing positions in companies. And then that exact idea of this newsletter will help you sound smarter to your boss at your job. That one thing just unlocked,
Yeah, your CPA's dropped in half from what I remember.
Yeah.
And I also remember you expanded that. It was be the smartest person in the room, be the smartest marketer in the room, be the smartest boss in the room, be the smartest DTC entrepreneur in the room, be the smartest entrepreneur in the room.
Yep. You're in sales, you got to know what's happening in marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
exactly.
it's all about getting into that persona of your target customer and really just figuring out what it's like to live as that person for a little bit and how they interact with your product and go from there.
100%. And again, at the end of the day, you can have different angles for your brand, and as long as you're targeting open and your angles or your creative catches the audience for that group, it's going to take a different path than your other angles, and you're going to get more scale.
It's not going to take away, it's only going to be additive.
Magic.
Yeah.
Magic. That's it.
It's magic, baby.
Welcome to Module 3, the Pilothouse Proven Method. This is Video 1, Step 1, Finding Your Top 5 Angles. In this module, we're going to take you through the Pilothouse Proven Testing Method. This is the exact same method that we take every single client through when they come to us. We've spent tens of millions of dollars in ad spend, and we have decades of digital marketing experience that we've used to perfect this method. Do you have a brand new account or no pixel data? That's no problem. This also works for established accounts that are looking for new winners. So here's the steps of the Pilothouse proven method. You'll see brainstorm angles, test copy and creative, find winning angles, build creative, and audience testing. Let's take a closer look at how to establish your angles. So here's some angle examples: founder story, product benefits, product features, discount focused when applicable, and what makes your product unique. Your angle should give a convincing reason for your potential customer to take action. Your angle should be your unique features or benefits of your product. Always ask yourself, why should consumers buy your product or service?
Welcome to video 2 of the Pilothouse proven method, the pilot test. So in this video, exciting stuff as we get started with taking those angles that you've now built and going beyond to write copy and prepare the first part of your test. All right, so step 1 is to write your copy. You don't need to worry about headlines yet. That will come as the step following this test. You just need to focus on your copy. So a big question that's going to help dictate the copy that you write is, do you know what your audience responds to? A big thing is, do you know why the market wants to respond to your product? Have you had the chance to see it in action, already get, whether it's having campaigns live, seeing a lot of testimonials on your website? If you're at that stage, then you can look to write copy with a bit more diversity in terms of the types of copy and the elements at play in the copy. So what we're talking about are things like emojis, which they're powerful, they're great eye catchers, they're great ways of breaking up long copy that you want people to engage all the way through with, but they're also a potential lever that could be influencing a click more heavily than other elements in the copy, especially if you're testing some copy with and some copy without. It can essentially break your variable testing when you're really trying to get to the root of, what USP is it that people are responding to? What hook is it that people are responding to? The kind of core of what this test is really looking to get at. So with that said, some of those other styles of copy, if you're in that position of knowing what your audience responds to and wanting to go a bit deeper and get into that, if you want to do emoji testing through all of your copy, the consideration there is you want to keep it the same in that case. Or if you want to look at things like checklists or different styles that get into that and really focusing on hooks and things like all caps, punchy things, that's kind of where that gets key. You want to try to be as consistent as possible in this test. So you can go that route, but you want to make sure it's consistent across that route. If it's consistent with your brand, that's great too. If you don't know that yet though, say, you've never run a campaign on Facebook, or you haven't had a successful campaign on Facebook, or your early days, you just launched your website, or you're going through a total rebrand or something like that. You probably want to look to keep the copy very focused on what the copy is trying to get the message across in the message itself, without all these supporting elements around it, like emojis and things like that. Probably want to run 2 to 3 sentence long copy in that case. That's a consideration to make at the beginning. So you'll know your comfort level on that and where you think you want to go with it. And that'll help dictate what you're doing there. And then another key thing with regards to that question too is, do you start with a conversion campaign as your objective, or do you start with a traffic objective? So at Pilothouse, we typically run conversion objective, which makes sense. And we'll get to that. Either path you choose at this stage will collide to that point deeper in this module. But at the beginning here, this is again a consideration. Do you ultimately know how your audience responds to ads on Facebook? If you have data and hey, yeah, my link CPC is great. It's often well below $1. It's fairly effective there. I'm really looking to broaden out what I'm already doing. then in that case, I'd say a conversion objective is probably a great fit at this stage, because you want to skip ahead to ultimately that end objective in a sense and really look at how that audience is going to respond to this. If you don't know that data, or you're in an industry where you're like, hey, I'm thinking it might be kind of expensive. I'm in a health and wellness industry, or I'm in a professional service industry, and I think it could be pretty expensive. Traffic's probably the route to go to give yourself a comparative benchmark on enough spend, but not so much spend you're going to be investing a ton of dollars into this early stage testing. That's the route that I would suggest if you're unsure, or if there's any risk of that too. So some other considerations too. You might need a new ad account, so be prepared to set that up. There are lots of different help articles you can find online if you don't have an ad account and you need to get that going. Facebook has some really good, robust ways of searching for that. So if you Google search, you can find it. You're going to also want to consider your budget. So typically for a test like this, an average budget would be something like $100 to $200. It's enough to get the volume of clicks link clicks that we're looking to compare, as well as the other data points, probably some bonus data points too. But it's also not so much you're going to be overspending at the point where it's before you're likely to start getting a lot of sales quickly from this portion of the test. In terms of audiences, typically we'd suggest standardize your audience that you're using in this test. Typically we'd lean into a top of funnel audience. A broad audience can be a good place to start, or you can run an interest or anything. But audience testing will come up as part of this, so you don't need to worry about that now. You just want to make sure it's standardized and not skewing your data. So broad is often the way to go. And then once your copy is ready, you want to start building. So as you start building, you're going to want to make sure you've got a boring headline and a boring image so that the copy really is the center of attention in your ad at this stage of testing. So when it comes down to your campaign, we suggest one campaign, ABO, you run one ad per ad set. At this stage, you're probably looking at 10 ads per angle, 5 angles, 50 ads, and then you want to run your ad set budget to start spending accordingly. Before you launch, consider setting up some spend check rules or stopgap rules. Remember, you're going to be breaking these ads out further. You're not likely to use only this campaign because your headline and your creative will be boring. You don't want that at the end point when you're looking to scale. So there are more steps to follow. So a rule means you won't spend your full budget and it won't keep going on that daily budget. So we would suggest setting up a rule once your ads reach a certain amount of clicks, or you've hit a spend cap for the day and you want to let it breathe a little bit longer to get to that $100 to $200 total, but you want to make sure all your ads are getting spent. That's where you want to go with that. So we would suggest doing that. Make sure to pay close attention too, because since iOS 14.5, we've noticed rules behaving strangely, even at times, given the different nuances in Facebook. So it's something to keep an eye on too. So when you get into it, the big thing you're going to be looking for is average link CPC. We already touched on rules or your bumpers, just making sure that it's moving in the direction that you want. And then your testing time frame, which typically would be at least a couple of days. Think about when you might want to test it. Where's the most valuable data going to come? Are you working with an e-commerce brand that typically sells things on the weekend when people have that extra time? Or is it Monday morning when it does really well? Is it the evening when it does really well? Think about these details and think about where you want to test for the most valuable data. You might want to lean into where you think you're going to get the most bonus signals at this stage, like add to carts, checkouts initiated, or purchases. You might also want to try to look at the hardest time to get it, to really understand what interest is there at a low baseline. There's different ways of going about it. You should have a good sense, given your goals and where your performance has been, or what you're looking to do with that. And at the end of the day, it's not the most important thing for this test, but it's something to consider. So learnings. This is where we want to dive in and take a look at all the different metrics and benchmarks for this test and for the results so far. So a huge part of this is knowing where to look and how to do it. So the biggest thing I can suggest at this point is get comfortable setting up custom columns in Facebook That's going to help you take a look. A good starting point is the performance and clicks default set of columns, and then you can go in and edit those and add the different elements like add to cart, checkout initiated, ROAS, purchases, cost per purchase, things like that to it as you go. You want to have a good flow of columns you're confident looking at. That makes it all so much easier to take a look and get comfortable with the data. At this stage, you're going to be looking heavily at link CPC and link CTR. Consider your average. What's the average for this test? Consider what ones have the best and what ones have the worst. And then from there, that'll help you formulate more. And we'll dive into a real-time example here to provide more insight. So as we get into it, headlines are going to be a key component of this, following from here. You're going to ultimately end up running with the same structure. In terms of an example of some of this testing, we'll focus on a copy example here, but headlines ultimately follows the same structure. We'll have more info about that in the next video once we dive into some of the data analysis and insights. But let's take a look at the copy example here before we move further. So looking at this example on the screen, you can see that for this test with this brand, we had an average link CPC of 12 cents with an average click-through rate of 3.16%. That's quite strong. This brand decided to use a conversion campaign because they've been running for a while and they really wanted to look for fresh angles to explore, given some changes in performance and knowing that they were moving into a new season of the year and different elements like that. So let's take a look at a few examples here and just see how they structured it. So you can see they have a pretty boring headline. It just says what the product is. They've got a white background with the product image. This is a more interesting product in its nature that could drive the click. But again, since they're looking for more, looking to broaden their angles rather than start ground up, it's not quite as critical for them in this test to really make this blend. Now, when you're interpreting the data, as I mentioned, start at the average. Most of it's pretty similar. There aren't too many that get way above the average. In some of these tests, you might end up seeing some ads with, say, like a $3 click, and you might have some with a 50 cent. That variance is quite helpful because that tells you what you're looking at and where you're going with that. However, in this case, they're all quite strong for a conversion audience. This is pretty good quality traffic for the cost that they're getting. So in this case, we already know that they're probably going to want to start thinking earlier than normal about some of these bonus signals. Which ads have the bonus signals? Is there a pattern between them? Which ads are most expensive? This bundle and save one is the most expensive. That may not necessarily be a bad thing in this case though, because a bundle and save angle is going to draw people who want to click through for the purpose of bundling and saving, which potentially has more purchase intent. So there's different ways of going about it from here. Let's take a look at the bonus signals here though and see if there are any patterns. So you can see Puppy Kids Extra Special, introducing the internet's favorite and no crumbs. This is a USP type angle. The internet's favorite, that's a great introductory type angle. Introducing again an introductory type angle. Extra special, that's a really fun way of engaging with the brand. And then Puppy Kids, again, looking at more of a use case type scenario. So let's go back and take a look at ad sets and see where they're at here. So they've got a 12 cent cost per click average. What is cute, for example, in terms of the angle they explored? It's right on average. Let's look at where those ads to cart came from. Are there any clear patterns here? So you can see fun, testimonial, testimonial. Those are fairly dominant there. It's only 2 add to carts, so you can't take way too much away from that, but it is an interesting indicator early on when you're looking at relative data. 12 cents with 3.36% link click-through rate, 2 add to carts. No purchases here yet, but everything else is looking quite promising. Let's go back and take another look at the other one. It is going to be fun. And again, pretty similar. It's average there. A couple of checkouts. Let's take a look. And a purchase. There's a bonus purchase on that one. So what's helpful about this, when you're looking through these, These are all very similar, so we know this angle's got a lot of potential. It's right on average in terms of the click data that we're working with, and it's got some bonus signals. This is one we probably want to include in taking away from here. Let's look at testimonial again. Again, pretty close, not a lot of variance, really good stuff here as well. So that's great. So we've got two that we could feel pretty confident in taking away and moving with. Let's look at upsell because it's got the other bonus and just see how it compares on the front end data that we're really looking for in this test. Again, pretty similar and pretty comparable. So that could be another one to potentially pull in based on that. When we're looking at the ones that were paused by the rule though, something to consider here is that these link CPCs are way higher than the average. So we might very well want to focus on one sub-angle from this and just lean into the top sub-angle for each to pull into our next step, which will be headline testing. And that ultimately concludes that portion of the video. In terms of action items, this is where your workbook comes in really handy. You're going to want to take the top 5 angles that you choose and come up with 10 different types of ad copy. 5 angles times 10 equals the 50 types of copy. So that'll include your sub-angles, the 10 per angle. Decide between the traffic or conversion campaign. Run your first copy and angle test for 24 to 48 hours in particular, looking for clicks, and then take the same steps and follow them for your headline test. Ultimately, you're going to want to look to pull some ad variations out that you could then be ready to combine with more headlines and more creative. Thanks so much for listening to this lesson. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one.
Wrong size, wrong color, didn't look right in the living room? There are hundreds of reasons your customers return products, but returns don't have to be goodbyes. They can be an opportunity to complete the shopping experience. Built exclusively for Shopify, Loop lets you create a delightful return experience to attract and retain more customers. By making it easy for your customers to find products they love, they'll come back again and again. See why thousands of Shopify brands like Allbirds, Chubbies, and Brooklinen trust Loop as their return partner at loopreturns.com/DTC.
Welcome to the pilot test, video 3. We'll be walking you through analyzing data and uncovering your winners. Before we get into this, just want to clarify that at the end of your copy test, you're going to want to be focusing on taking that data and then applying your winners from the copy side to headline testing. So you're going to want to write for each winning angle you pull from the copy test, just to save yourself time and effort. You're going to want to write 10 headlines, different ones between them. Think about the types of headlines you want to write and pair with it. It's going to depend on the data. If you're seeing great click costs, you could definitely look to lean into certain types of headlines that might give you more bonus data deeper down. If you're still, feeling a little bit uncertain, given the copy testing about really what is the best direction to go, think about, again, kind of looking at a scientific model for writing your headlines and keeping them quite standard there. When you're doing the headline testing, it's up to you at this point. A suggestion would be, if you're looking to get as much out of the headlines as possible, is to keep your copy pretty boring, like one standard copy between it and a boring image, and then keep your headlines as the most interesting thing. You can, however, combine your headlines with your copy from your winning portion to combine it and speed it up the process a little bit, as the headline is often the first thing someone would look at on Facebook anyways. So it's up to you. At the end of it, you can either combine all the winners if you do them separately together in the following step, or you can speed it along at this step. It depends on how scientific you want to be about that data. And some of that honestly sometimes comes down to your media buying style and what you're looking to accomplish. So there's the side about headline testing. Let's get into module 4, the pilot test. Video 3, analyzing data and uncovering winners, here just to give you more resources as you prepare. So first of all, congratulations. Stage 1 and 2 are now complete. This is where, in my eyes, the fun really, really begins in terms of the data deep dive and understanding exactly what signals you're seeing to help you move in the right direction here at this stage of testing. So we want to first look at uncovering winners. So I know a big thing is making sure your columns are organized and you're confident in what you're looking at. A huge thing for us is when we're looking at what data signals should we look at, because there's a lot of columns you could choose, a lot of different things you could choose. We typically lean into really what are our end goals. So in this testing, link CTR, link CPC, I would suggest those over a CPC or a CTR, because that could be someone clicking anywhere on the ad rather than clicking towards your end goal, which is getting results, sales, or leads or whatever that looks like. But with this, you'll want to get that set up. You'll see in this screenshot here that we've got that organized, and we're diving into the ad set as well. So when you look at the ad set level, you can get a sense of what's performing. So you can use the naming filters if you've set it up with 50 ad sets, so you've got one ad per ad set. Then you can use the naming filters and filter by angle and take a look at your averages and get a sense of, okay, what's got the best CTR, what's performing the best across the board. That'll give you a good step back look from this first portion of testing. Then in terms of kind of going into some of these details, I know we've already touched on a lot of these, but link CPC, CTR, and then bonus indicators like add to cart, checkouts initiated, and purchases. Those are the ones that really are going to add a lot of value to your profitability goals ultimately when you're measuring and looking at how you can optimize. So those are the ones to focus on. The big thing here is, it isn't a one size fits all for every brand. There's certain nuances to each product, whether it be COGS, cost of goods sold, whether it be your goals, whether it be this or that. There's so many different ways to look at it. So the biggest value that we can provide is the framework for how to look at the data and best understand what is going to be most valuable for your business. So you want to ask yourself questions like, is one angle outperforming another? Are any sub-angles there to lean into? What kind of copy style themes are there? Are there winning angle themes? And ultimately you want to look at an example and see where you can go with it. So in this example, you can see that there are a couple of ad sets here with bonus, so the benefits and the from home angle there. When you're looking at the CPC and the CTR, you can see that one of the ones with the highest CTR didn't actually get those bonus signals yet, but it did generate a lot of interest, and that's an inventory angle there, which is, again, getting into a scarcity and urgency type play. So for us, if we're looking, okay, like, hey, the copy testing, where do we want to move on with the next step? There's probably 3 you could choose here, the highest CTR ones. 2 of those have bonus signals as well, and then one of them there. That's 3 angles that you could pull from this, for example. A big thing too is look at like what didn't work and really think about the why behind it. And then, as mentioned in the other example, choose your top 2 to 3 angles to test. So when we're thinking about the why behind it, you can think of all the different scenarios for a customer. So for example, if a certain angle didn't work, what might be an objection to that angle? Is that likely a bigger flag because of the way that angle is positioned? If that's the case, okay, maybe we should focus in a different direction. Different details like that. That's one example, but there's lots of different reasons to go through. And this is still a full process where there are multiple steps to it to really uncover all the different data points. So a big question to ask too is, are there any sub-angles that have appeared? When you're covering more ground in this test with the different types of sub-angles you're looking at, different copy between all 10 variations for one angle, you should get a lot of good insight as to what's happening there, and is something unexpected happening? Did you see better data from something that you weren't expecting? Another place to make sure you double check is, are there any comments on your ads? That can be valuable insight as well. You'll see if you see positive or negative, and maybe which ads have the most reactions, because ultimately in the algorithm, if you get more post reacts and more comments and things like that, there is a good chance that those ads could be rewarded and see their costs decrease, because it's encouraging the actions that Facebook also wants to see on the platform. So those are things to consider and look into as well. And you want to pick the top 2 or 3 angles you want to move forward with. Think as well, like, it's valuable if you're running the same type of sub-angle or copy format or things like that across multiple angles. Take a look at that data too. You can filter it by ad name as well and look and compare and just see what those averages look like and any outliers. And that's ultimately the conclusion of this lesson. What I'm going to do, though, before we conclude it, is dive in and just show you how I might look at an ad account here. So looking at this test from our last one, we'll go through and we can just spend some time looking at the ad set level here. So let's take a look. We've got our main elements here. So we know that there's a fun name here for the fun angle. So it's right on average in terms of its link CPC and around where our CTR is, but it's also got the bonus items here. So I would think that the fun angle is definitely one to consider. Let's remove that filter and just see what else we have here. I want to look at the more expensive ones, the upsell one. Remember, this is a top of funnel audience, so this messaging is going to be a little bit different than if we were to test this in a retargeting audience. So when we're looking here, let's filter over here. And yeah, we see, again, get that filter right here. It's a little bit above average, but it's also got a bonus one here. So really it's just there are a couple of outlying angles here. And this could be sub-angles for us to avoid and really focus on these, especially considering there's a bonus here as well. It's very early, but again, this being close to the average is a good sign. And let's look at testimonial too. This is an interesting one because logically you'd think that testimonial might do better in retargeting, but that isn't always the case. And it's showing some promise as well in terms of the data here. Let's take a look at Cute just to compare it, because we've got 3 that we could run with for sure. Now there's no bonus signals here, even though it's very, very similar to the average. And then let's look at PW here. Again, very similar to the average, but no bonuses. So really, the key learning is just even looking at the ad set and at the angle level. For me, I'm noticing there's a pretty consistent link CPC. So this metric, while it's helpful, isn't going to be the most valuable to us as we push with this. Pretty much everything has click potential here. However, there are sub-angles that are outliers that we may want to either avoid or group more into a high qualifying type test. So for example, the bundle and save, we know that, that's probably looking at people, at engaging people who are more likely to be, oh, I want to bundle and save, I'll click through that. That's a factor there. So we may want to pair that in a creative or headline test in a way that really aligns with that and would look at the endpoint conversions. Not necessarily bad the way that it went in this test, because it's still getting a 26-cent click, which is quite good on Facebook. But we may want to look at that a bit differently than some of these other ones. With these ones, we may want to structure headlines as a next step, really thinking about, hey, how can we look to get more bonus signals? How can we drive ads to cart through the headline testing, given that we know we're seeing very similar stuff in a conversion audience between the copy? That's a thought. And so then I might structure it scientifically for that and speed it up in this case and go jump to that step, knowing that we're probably looking for some more bonus signals accordingly. So that's a potential direction we could go here, and just to make sure we're really spending that money as efficiently as possible to gain these learnings accordingly before we move into the scaling periods. And that's going to be the lesson for this one. Thank you so much. Welcome to the pilot test. This video, we're going to talk about identifying creatives needed. Now that you've gone through copy testing, headline testing, and you've interpreted your data and looked at what the best next steps are for your brand as you work through this testing process. So you've now got winning copy and winning headlines. The key here is pairing it with creative, as those are, outside of the CTA, 3 of the top 4 elements in your ad for really moving the needle. So with this stage, this is where it gets fun in terms of the creative, and you don't need to worry as much about boring creative, and you can start introducing some angle-specific creative in particular. How you want to do this is you want to look at 5 to 10 angle-specific creatives per angle that you can combine with your winning headlines and angles. So in terms of the mix of styles, the ones that we typically lean into at Pilothouse are static, GIF, user-generated content, UGC, carousel, testimonials overlay, and which is either a testimonial video type situation, or you're overlaying a testimonial on a lifestyle or static image, and then video content as well. So when it comes down to it, you want to get this set up in a way that makes sense based on the data you have. So if you have 3 angles and say 2 headlines per angle that you deemed, I want to push this further and see where this goes with creative, you're going to want to, for example, what you could do in that case is have 3, like 10 ads per angle, and then run half your headlines on one group, 1 headline on 5, 1 headline on the other half, creative, so that you're ultimately mixing and matching. You can also standardize your headline and your copy if you'd prefer, which is the example we're going to show. Again, it kind of depends on how scientific you want to be. Certain winning headlines or angles might pair specifically more so with a certain creative in your test. So you can always pair it that way. There is a benefit to having the same headline with the same copy and a couple of different creatives, so you can really get a sense of, being able to confidently answer that question when you're through this stage of, okay, what really is a key, what do I think is the key driving element in this ad's success or lack of success at this stage of testing. And if you feel confident that you have enough different benchmarks to look at as well as that, then that's a good signal of how you've set it up. So I'd suggest taking a step back after you've set it up and looking at that as well. So let's move into another pro tip here, which is landing pages. We do recommend exploring landing pages where possible. Now, when you're testing landing pages, if you have 2 landing pages, for example, you can again kind of group those into your ads in this test. You're going to want to test at least 2 page styles when you are testing landing pages. We've got an example here of a strong performing style we've run with here, and there are different examples that we like to lean into when we're talking landing pages. So short form, long form, flyer page. A flyer page is more like what you would see in like a newspaper flyer. It's showing potentially different offers available that then click through to your site. Founder's story or advertorial as well, long form style page too.
All right, so here is an example of the creative testing portion of the pilot test. Now that you've got all of those learnings from your angle testing, your headline testing, how to apply data, this is the next key step here, with creative being a huge part of your ad, obviously. So we're going to show you an example from the D2C ad account with a pilot test we ran for sharing this course with more and more people. So let's open up the screen share here and get right into it. Okay, so looking at this, we structured this test the same in terms of how it logically follows from the other ones. We're running the same conversion objective, same formatting with 1 ad per ad set, $10 per day to each ad set until we have the data that we feel comfortable working with to move on to the next step, which will be audience testing. What we did, though, is we compiled the top elements from the other 2 steps, brought them in here. So we removed 1 angle that was by far the worst performer. We kept the other angles, took the top elements from those angles, and then combined them with the new creative for this portion, with creative being tailored to the broader angles as well, so that we can make sure we're gathering that data combined with this. And I'll show you what I mean by that here. What you'll notice too is we tested the same copy on multiple creatives. So the benefit there is then when we're testing more creatives with more of that same copy per creative, we're able to compare the creative on multiple copy and the multiple copy by creative, which gives us more levers to pull and more layers of understanding when interpreting the data. So for example, you'll see this is a bit of a guru style ad in terms of that anti-guru angle. So this is built with that in mind. This is more like a product comparison style graphic. We're looking at the benefits of D2C Scale School versus the challenges that gurus create in their content and those types of elements. So the copy here, you'll notice, is some of our top guru copies, same with headline. We have that variation, but we have more copy variations that fit with this because on the broader scale, that copy even in other angles, still fits with it. Looking at it as well, we've got this creative, which is focused on the benefit, kind of problem solution benefit style copy, and the end result that came from it. So basically what you're going to get from the program here. And then this one, more of a meme style thing. This, again, we've seen a lot of success with these styles of ads across the agency. So this is a contrasting style to some of those other ones. And then even more contrasting is UGC content here. So you can see that though that this is the same copy as one of those other ones. So we structured that accordingly. And we ultimately created 40 variants so that we could do that accordingly and get that data to interpret how we want to. So when we're looking at the data, if we sort here by link clicks, you can see this. I'll sort by link CTR here initially just to see what clicked through the best. So you're seeing anti-guru. That pattern is what we've seen in this test earlier on, with anti-guru being a top angle in terms of CTR and some of the intent that we're seeing. What's interesting though is you go a little bit further down, and even though this doesn't have the same CTR, it has a lower link CPC. It's with a much lower CPM than some of these, so that's showing a totally different audience in terms of how it's been served early on. We did get a couple of add to carts early on, so we can tell, looking at this data, that this, for example, appears to have potentially more intent than some of these ones behind it. So that's a good learning to apply going forward into audience testing. I would want to make sure, because of some of these bonus metrics, we're considering this accordingly. So at this stage of the game, you want to figure out how you want to rank what you're seeing based on the data you're seeing. I'd highly encourage you to rank the data looking at things like those bonus metrics. Are you able to get a sense of intent? If you move forward with those, what do you think is going to perform the best towards your goal based on these data signals you're seeing? So looking at this data, I would be ranking things like CTR. I want to make sure I'm going after things that are driving a lot more intent at this stage of the pilot test. I'd be looking at CPC. Where can we make sure those costs are strong? But when I'm looking at CPC, I'm also looking at bonus metrics and CTR together. So that, for example, if I'm picking some lower link CPC to move through in the next step, I'm considering, hey, it did show more intent because of the adds to cart and elements like that. So there's certain things you want to consider here. Ultimately, a big area of opportunity too is to create a really great master doc, which is what our team has done here. This basically takes us through every step and gives us all the data. So we've got all those notes compiled and everything centralized here for anybody looking at it. And we can see immediately, looking at these data points, what really is performing the best. You'll see exactly that kind of thought here. This made the list because of those 2 ATCs. It generated a lead. It got some great CPCs and elements like that relative to the other ones we're seeing, even though it's still higher than where we want it to be. So these are the types of things you want to consider as you're moving through. And this is a great way to note down, what are you qualifying for that next step as you move through the test? So we know exactly here, if, for example, we're busy and we have to go cover another task in our business, we can come back and be like, these were the ads that I want to bring into the audience testing now that I'm ready to set that up and move from there.
So in terms of action items, and stick to your workbook on this as well, but you'll want to create 5 to 10 angle specific creatives, pair it with your top winning copy and headlines. Remember that you want to isolate the variable you're testing. So again, the more consistency you have, the better. If you have multiple winning copy and headlines and you're feeling uncertain about, I don't know if I want to, mix and match and now introduce multiple variables, or I don't know how I want to do that, definitely consider how you really what you're looking for at the end of this test. In some cases, it's great to have 2 different headlines with the same creative to really understand, is it the creative or is it the headline, or is it leaning one way or the other? It's not going to be 100% one or the other. It's not static that way. But if you're structuring it with that kind of intent, you take a step back and you look at it, you'll be in a good place as far as how you've set it up. And then run your test and know that you're testing creative here, and then explore the data as it comes in. And that's it for this lesson. Thanks so much for watching. Welcome to audience testing. So this is a fun portion of this, where now that you've got insights around copy, headline, and creative. You're compiling this all into feeding the engine as the engine drives down this path with the audiences you want to test and explore. So, well done, first of all, for making it this far and moving through all these steps. The big thing with this is, as you know, Facebook is a powerful acquisition tool. A huge element is timing and how we're timing out showing our ads to people. The right time in the right place. And so audiences and combined with the machine learning creates a huge opportunity. So at this stage, it sounds pretty big, but you're going to essentially launch your top ads in 30 plus audiences. The reason being here is that it's important to note you're not looking for conversion specifically unless you've already gone down this path and you're getting to an endpoint in your data. At this stage of the game, we're going pretty broad on audiences so that you can get pretty quick data back in terms of how all of that compares, and ultimately look at which audiences, which ad sets are performing the best that way. An important thing here to note too is you do not want to stack audiences together. You want to stack winning creative, winning headlines, and winning copy, but you do not want to actually stack your audiences themselves. And I'll show you an example of what I mean by that as we go here. So in terms of your process, you're going to run a conversion campaign at this step, no matter what, really. By this point, you should have some good learnings, whether you've been running traffic all the way through or you've already been running conversion. You want to run ABO and separate each audience, and each audience essentially is an interest. You can refer to it as that way, but you can run different types of audiences. So anyways, you're going to want to run ABO with separate ad sets so that you can ensure each audience is getting an even spend distribution. Then you're going to want to run approximately $5 to $15 per ad set. However, that can differ depending on your product and your front-end costs and all of those metrics too. So take a look at how that relates to what you're looking for. An average would be $5 to $15 though, even for a more expensive product. Because again, we're not looking entirely at conversions at this step just yet. 30 total. Don't stack, as I mentioned on the previous slide. So you're not going to want to stack your audiences because you want to make sure you can measure which one is driving the performance.
All right, so in terms of a screen share here for audience testing, let's show you how we moved from creative to audience during our pilot test in the D2C ad account. So what we did here is first, let's just show this. We opted to run with one creative, our top click-through creative from that previous test. Now, the key here is we did see, promising results, some bonus signals, even from some of the other creative that's not included in this test. We went with this just to see how this would show in terms of potential, knowing that, hey, that other creative has a couple of great bonus signals. It's got a lead, it's got a couple of ads to cart. There's some good promise there. If we want to consolidate this down now coming out of the pilot test, we've qualified enough of an opportunity from what we're seeing relative to this test to run that longer and further beyond. So the idea here is let's standardize the same creative across every audience because that's going to give us the most comparable data. But let's use one that showed potential, but maybe didn't quite show as many bonus signals in case this test uncovers bonus signals. That was the decision here. But again, if you want to lean more into the bonus signals, looking at relative, making that best case decision on your own, that's definitely something you can do here as well. So looking at this, you'll see we had a few bonus signals come from this, but I'll show you where the audience setup lies. So what we did here, let's sort by name and just run you through. So same setup again as per usual. You'll notice we've got Bitcoin, Bloomberg, D2C advertising, digital marketing, some of the end goals of taking the course. These are some of the things that people might read who take the course because they're business founders and business owners. We've got different learning and social media networking type areas here. We've even got leaders or some of the leaders in the space too to bring into some of that angle as well. And then some tools like Wix or WooCommerce as well. or things that might be of interest. So in this case, we chose these interests. Let's go in here and just show you what this looks like. So you'll see here, a bit of a broad audience size, but within a range that we would be looking for. We've got that daily budget coming through here. In this case, we haven't launched any exclusions. We've kept it really just focused on this Bitcoin interest here, broad relative to our audience. And then we've left the languages open there and run automatic placements. So this is standard across each ad set. This is an example of, essentially the minimum you could start with. In this case, you may opt to look at excluding custom audiences, or you might choose English only as your language to direct that more. Those are best practices we'd recommend in the majority of campaigns typically. But in this case, again, we're looking for pretty quick data in a broad audience, so not as much of a concern on our end. However, there's no harm in including those in here. And that's the majority of that. Once you go through this, you want to be able to compile those results. We were able to go back and take a look at, okay, what are our averages? Where are we starting to see things really come to the forefront, move the needle? Pretty clear in the ranking, that we're seeing some of the tools that people use, particularly around digital marketing, as well as some of the leaders in the space. Those are some of the biggest opportunity areas there as we went through. So that's the audience testing example.
Again, refer to your workbook in this step, but create your conversion campaign. Use ABO, separate your ad sets. So you're going to have 30 plus ad sets. Remember, $5 to $15 per ad set, and 30 plus audiences total. All right, so welcome to the pilot test, where we're going to talk about consolidating your winners into scale campaigns. So you've done a lot of hard work in laying the groundwork. So well done on getting everything prepped and having a lot of learnings so far and navigating all the different directions that you can go on Facebook. The next key step is going to be your audiences. So with this said, you want to review and take a look at what your winners are. This is a good time for you to stack if you're looking at stacking, just so you can consolidate everything down into one kind of core winners campaign as an example, or a campaign structure that makes sense for you. Basically, you've got everything you need now to build super ads. You've got creative with potential, headlines with potential, copy with potential, audience understanding. You've got a lot of data insights that you're comfortable with. And now's where you take those ad components and send them off to the big leagues and try to consolidate it all down into scale campaigns. So as I mentioned, it's a good time to stack audiences. Really what you want to do is you want to use a lot of the Pilothouse proven method around scaling in terms of your structure, given the process work you've already done. So a typical practice for us is we lean into CBO campaigns, CBO over ABO, because CBO, Facebook uses what they call the breakdown effect, where it ultimately uses the machine learning to try to focus spend towards the best pocket that it can spend on, given the timing and all the different elements it's looking at. So CBO, we find it's often a great momentum building strategy. Again, flexible here in if you're noticing different data points and you want to explore different options. But then we also look at typically 5 or 6 ad sets per campaign. You'll notice in some of these, in the example I'll share, we're doing 3 ad sets per campaign because we have a lot of historic data now. We're going a little bit broader. We're not diversifying quite as much within the campaign as might be valuable early on. And then typically we recommend 5 to 6 ads per ad set as well. Again, you'll see us anywhere from 3 to 6. The idea behind all of this is that you want to give your campaigns enough focus direction to stack the data and dial in on the top pockets, but but you also want to add a little bit of diversity so that if something's having a bad day, something else can pick up the slack. If things start to move a different direction, your campaign isn't bound to just one pocket, and it can go a different direction. A helpful trick that we'll look at when we're structuring things, I might lay out all the different ad data I have and then try to pair things together so that, say, from your testing so far, there has been one, like from your creative testing, you actually got some early sales and there was one kind of particular, there may be a couple ads that were driving a lot of that. And you see these patterns emerging and you're like, okay, that's a great ad. I want to scale that out. You may want to look at what are those other metrics? What's the CTR? What's the CPC? All these details. And look at the other ads, their metrics and how they're going to be placed around it so that you're honing in on where you want spend to go, but you're giving Facebook room as well to diversify if needed, if that makes sense. So you might want that top ad to be your top click-through rate ad in this campaign based on the historic data when you're breaking out into this format. That's just a helpful tip that we use when we're scaling constantly and breaking ads into scale campaigns. So I do want to show you a live account example of what this looks like and ultimately what we're looking for at this stage of the game. Thanks so much for listening to this part of the course.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that right now at direct-to-consumer, all one word, .co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.